It's our top story, that bombshell report that the U.S. Supreme Court could be poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion nationwide. The apparent draft opinion was leaked to Politico. It's dated February 10th and is written by Justice Samuel Alito. It was not meant to be released to the public and is not final. A decision to overrule Roe v. Wade would lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states and could have huge ramifications for this year's elections. And joining me now to help explain what all of this could mean is Widener University law professor Michael Dimino. Professor, thank you so much for being with us here this afternoon. So can you just talk about what the immediate aftermath of this being overturned, what would happen?
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here. The immediate aftermath would likely be far more political than legal. In Pennsylvania in particular, there would be extremely unlikely for any greater restrictions on abortion to be put into place, given Governor Wolf's support of abortion rights. It would, however, open up the possibility for greater restrictions on abortion rights if there should be a pro-life governor and pro-life majorities in the Pennsylvania House and Senate. And so the immediate impact is likely to be kind of ratcheting up of the interest in the state legislative and gubernatorial races this November.
So that's the case here in Pennsylvania, but other states, though, where they can be far more restrictive on that if this were to actually happen.
That is certainly true. There are some states who have already passed laws, including Mississippi's, the law that is the subject of this challenge in the Dobbs case that the Supreme Court is now considering. Some of these states have passed laws trying to anticipate that the court might overrule Roe versus Wade, and so that those more restrictive laws are already in place as soon as the Supreme Court gives them the green light.
So if this were to be overturned, what would happen if a woman tried to get an abortion in some of these states?
I think it's important to recognize first, this is a kind of basic principle, that this decision, if it does become final along the lines that the draft opinion seems to suggest, and it is only a draft, this is not a final opinion, a lot can change between the time now, this draft being leaked, and the time that the opinion is released finally. But if it does become that case, it does not make abortion illegal anywhere. Instead, it simply opens up the possibility. It says we, the court, are not going to stand in the way of restrictions on abortion. But the states would still have the option of putting in restrictions on abortion or not, or of guaranteeing greater availability of abortion rights. So what would happen is if we're talking about one of those states that does impose greater restrictions on abortion rights, and a woman attempted to get an abortion from a provider, likely the provider would refuse to provide it because it would be illegal to do so. And if the abortion were provided in a way that that state law made illegal, then whatever penalties that state law imposed could then be imposed on the provider.
So I want to talk to
you. The likely effect would be that you'd have women who seek abortions would go to states with more liberal abortion laws, and so it would make it much less convenient for women to obtain abortions in those states that had restrictive abortion laws, but it would not outlaw it across the country, and women seeking an abortion would have to undergo the inconvenience and the expense of having to go to a place where the abortion would be more easily obtained.
I want to talk to you about this opinion, this leaked draft of an opinion. First, when would we usually see the actual opinion? And then talk to me about how unusual it is that we get something like this leaked.
This is extremely unusual. It has never happened before. To my knowledge, the only time that anything like this has ever happened before was many decades ago, where a clerk leaked information about the likely decision of the Supreme Court in a case that had financial implications. But I've never seen a draft opinion released while the case is pending. In the normal course of things, the Supreme Court decides all of the cases for its given term, which starts in October, by the following end of June or first week of July. So we would have expected, and there's no reason to think that anything's different now, we still expect a final decision in this Dobbs case within the next 2 months.
Yeah, very unprecedented indeed. And again, how does something like this happen?
Well, the pattern of the decision-making process for the court is that they hear oral argument in a case, and then a few days later, the justices meet in a conference to take a tentative vote about how the case will be decided. And then one of the justices is assigned the duty of writing a draft opinion for the court. Apparently that was Justice Alito. He writes a draft, he circulates it to the other justices, and then they comment on the draft. They have the option of writing a concurring opinion or a dissenting opinion, and changes are made to the draft in this negotiation process over the course of several months. And so, it's that at some point in that process, the justices themselves get a look at this draft, and the justices' clerks, their assistants, and the rest of the employees look at these drafts as a way of advancing through this negotiation deliberation process. And we assume that one of those employees, perhaps even a justice, him or herself, has taken this draft and decided to release it to Politico. But that is a tremendous violation of the trust that is placed in those employees. And this leak will almost certainly have tremendous damage to the court's ability to conduct its deliberations in future cases.
Well, that investigation is now ongoing. A lot to unpack here. Professor Michael Domino, thank you so much for spending some time and breaking that down for us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.